Well, if you're like me, you're probably a fairly big Breaking Bad fan. But if you're not like me, chances are you've at least heard something about Netflix's new El Camino movie, which is in fact a continuation of the Breaking Bad series in a feature-length format. So when this movie was announced, it kind of seemed a little odd. One reason in particular was that there was such a far gap between when the actual series ended to now when the movie was released. So it seemed like a strange way to continue the show, especially in the midst of Better Call Saul, which is already a spin-off of Breaking Bad. So in the age of cinematic universes and whatnot, it seemed a little nerve-wracking and put a lot of people at unease because it's like, oh no, this is going to be a new franchise. I'm a big fan of Vince Gilligan. I think he's been doing a lot of good work in TV in the past few years, but he'd never really done a movie before, so I was interested to see how he would helm the director's chair. Also, interestingly as well, this movie was strictly written by Vince Gilligan alone, so he did not have his usual writing staff, which also brought a little unease to me because I'm like, I'm sure he's great and I know he does great work, but I'm wondering how much of an impact his writing staff has on the overall feel of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and what their absence would feel like in contrast. Fortunately so, El Camino was a very enjoyable film, and I'm going to leave it at that for my general consensus, but I did enjoy the movie. This is, if you haven't told already, an unscripted video. The movie just recently was released, and I just recently watched it a few days ago. And while I do want to gather my thoughts and give it a second watch so I can have a better overall experience with the film, I do think I want to give my initial reactions to this movie in a very different, unscripted type of video where I just kind of go off and let you know what I think about it. So if I ramble, which I'll try not to do because I am prone to rambling, I'll edit around it the best I can. So yeah, I'm going to give you guys a quick, as concise video as I can. So here we go. So of course this movie takes place after a gigantic 5-season series. So there's going to be a lot of spoilers in here in this video because it's impossible to even bring up the idea of this movie without spoiling. So there's your warning. I'm going to go ahead and delve right into details. This movie takes place exactly right after the events of Breaking Bad's Felina, which was the finale for the show, and it takes place after Walter White breaks into a Nazi camp where Jesse Pinkman, our lead character for this movie, was being held captive. And he basically breaks in there and through some, events and shenanigans, ends up killing the entire Nazi crew in revenge, for his own reasons. But the important thing is here that Jesse Pinkman is freed because of the actions of Walt. So, yeah, that's where we are here. That's a very awful, butchered version of a synopsis, I suppose, for Felina, but you didn't come here for that. You came here for El Camino, so we'll talk about that. Basically, this movie is dealing with Jesse Pinkman as he struggles to find his freedom and overcome trauma and just kind of become a better person through the events of this movie and the aftermath of Breaking Bad. The story is really well done. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about this movie was, even though it was right off the cuff of a show as extreme and intense and just high stakes as Breaking Bad, it was nice to see a lower staked, slower paced, just kind of floaty movie where we just follow this man around his journey towards redemption. So I thought that was honestly refresher because there's so much to unpack with Breaking Bad. Talking to my buddy about it the other day, he said by the end of the show he felt like his hair was going to turn gray because it's so stressful. So it was nice to see, while this movie, there's a lot riding on this movie, it was nice to see them take their time and just let this character's arc and journey unfold to what hopefully is his conclusion. Because this movie, while not necessary, even after seeing it and enjoying it, I can say it didn't need to happen, but it reminds me a lot of movies along the lines of Logan or Blade Runner 2049, where there's a long space in between the movies and they just come out and it's just this nice little story that's wrapped up in a nice bow tie, and you're like, I didn't need that, but I'm glad that I did get it, because it's just, they're great. And while El Camino is very different than those movies, the overall experience I had in retrospect was very similar to those two films. So, performances. This is a performance movie without a doubt. First and foremost, of course, is Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse Pinkman tremendously. The guy is giving it his all. I think this is definitely, at least so far, I hope Aaron Paul continues to do more and has a fruitful career. But speaking now, this is definitely his role of a lifetime. And he plays it tremendously, knocks it out of the park. Between this and Breaking Bad, I think we get some of his best work as this character, because there's so much he's doing here. It's easy to take for granted while you're watching the movie, but Aaron Paul is playing three very different variations on the Jesse Pinkman character. We start out and he's, right out of the Nazi base camp, and he's scared, he's in shock, he has PTSD, just a very unhinged shell of a character, which is heartbreaking to see, especially if you have watched Breaking Bad. So there's that, but then you have flashbacks to his time in the camp when he's, still, in shock, but just kind of like paralyzed with fear the whole time. So you have that, and then you have his redemption arc towards the end where he becomes a different character. But also on top of that, you have flashbacks to before everything hit the fan, and he's just Jesse Pinkman as we knew him from like seasons 1 and 2. So it's a lot. It is a lot that Aaron Paul is carrying on his shoulders, but he does it so well. He makes it look effortless. The guy is a powerhouse actor, and he does a fantastic job. As far as the other cast goes, we get some reprised roles from characters like Badger and Skinny Pete. They're a fun time. And you get Robert Forster, the late Robert Forster, who tragically passed away, I believe, the day of this movie's release. It's very tragic, shocking, just a very, very strong actor lost. But he had a lot more screen time in this movie than I thought. And he plays the disappearing man. His actual character name is slipping me, but he's the owner of a vacuum shop who also runs a back-end business of helping people with less than satisfactory pasts just kind of fade out into obscurity. So that's what his role is here. And of course, there's kind of a ticking clock where Jesse doesn't have enough money to, contact Robert Forster's character and seek freedom. So a lot of this movie is Jesse running around trying to get enough money for him to start a new life and become a better person. So that's where a lot of this movie's conflict comes from, and that's why I said it's low stakes. It's just kind of this one character's goal. He's out of the meth business, the Nazis are dead. It's really just him dodging the cops and other criminals and trying to keep his head up and get the heck out of Albuquerque. So it's a lot of fun. It is a very funny movie, which I was surprised by. There's a lot of comedy in here, which is nice because Breaking Bad was always kind of a black comedy. And even in the later seasons when stuff gets really heavy, there's always the lighter comic elements, like just situational humor, and then stuff like the Saul character, just keeping things light enough so it doesn't feel too drab. As far as new characters go, there's not too many. In fact, there's not many characters at all here. I guess one recurring character in particular, which major spoiler if you haven't seen it, but if you're watching this far, do you really care? One big character is Walter White, who returns, and seeing him, Bryan Cranston, return to that role was great. I think he had a bald cap on. I was talking to this with a few people, and I think because of probably he was shooting another project, Bryan Cranston had a bald cap on first, and they sell it pretty well. The more the scene goes on, the more you buy it. But at first, I was like, is that him? I couldn't really tell, and then I realized, okay, that's him. He has a bald cap on, and then I just enjoyed the scene for what it was. But that was just a little note I had jotted down in my head. But it was a great scene. Kind of a sad scene. It showed that there was, long ago, before everything went downhill, that there was a somewhat healthy relationship between the Walt and Jesse character, and it just kind of made you realize how far things had fallen. And it also acted as because this scene comes towards the end as a flashback. There's no, I actually kind of made it sound like Walt comes back from the dead or something like that. There's none of that, not a George A. Romero special here. But no, it's just a flashback scene, and it comes towards the end of the movie, and it just works as a nice, top off to that character of Walt and also his relationship with Jesse. And it works towards strengthening the theme of just Jesse trying to find a future and what that future might look like, and just kind of showing that he is a good soul deep down, and that if he could just escape from his rough situation, he could just finally find peace. And fortunately, when this movie comes to an end, he does find peace. That was probably the biggest weight taken off my chest while watching this movie, because I always did read the ending of Breaking Bad's Felina, for Jesse's character at least, as him finally escaping and finding peace. And at the end of the day, yes, that ending there is fine enough for me. But to just see his ending come to fruition, and just see, the extra stakes he had to go to get his ending, his happy ending, was nice. And I do think it does work as a nice epilogue to the whole Breaking Bad series. It's kind of an epilogue to an epilogue, at least for Jesse's character. So yeah, it all in all, it was a very solid movie with some great performances, surrounded by some good tension. There's a shootout scene towards the end of this movie that in particular is a lot of fun. But besides that, not really a whole lot of action. A lot of it is just kind of sneaking around and trying to reach a very specific goal, and then the rest of it is just kind of very heavy character stuff, and I enjoyed it. It was definitely different than what I was expecting, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the fact that it took a different route than Breaking Bad's usual tone was refreshing, and seeing the Jesse Pinkman character get more light was nice. Because as far as season 5 is concerned, Jesse is definitely a main player that kind of fades out of the main narrative of Breaking Bad, at least a little bit. If there is a flaw with season 5 of Breaking Bad, I would say it's that Jesse doesn't get as much screen time as he did in the previous seasons. So if anything, this movie does kind of make up for that small flaw in the series itself, and it works to a great effect. I had a great time with this movie. Aaron Paul absolutely kills it. I think if you're a Breaking Bad fan, you should definitely watch it. Since I saw all of the show and I rewatched a good chunk of the last season before this movie, I can't really put myself in the shoes of someone who's coming in blind to El Camino. So as far as recommending it for that audience, I'm not sure I can. I most likely would say probably don't watch this movie if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, because it really does affect the emotional impact you'll have while watching this, at least your connection towards this character. I think in itself, it works as a strong story with an interesting premise and a fairly crystal clear idea of what the main goal is. But I do think you will be missing quite a bit if you don't have the previous history of seeing the entire series. But yeah, definitely recommend it for the Breaking Bad fans. Everyone else outside of that, I mean, watch it if you want. But as far as fans to the show, it is a must-see. I thought it was a great time. So yeah, those are my off-the-cuff thoughts of this movie. Like I said, kind of a loose, unscripted video in comparison to my other Nerd Theaters, but I just wanted to get this out here because I wanted to have my initial thoughts of this movie out on YouTube, while also working on my Halloween stuff that I'm going to be releasing towards the end of this month. So this is just kind of a quick thing I wanted to throw together to kind of space the gap between this and Halloween/horror movie stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for listening to me talk about a movie for a little bit. And as always, until next time, stay tuned, you guys.